Hi, and welcome to the Park and Rec Board meeting. Today, April 13th, 2021. It is 7:30. We'll get started. I'll pass it to Doug Kraus.
Thank you, Monica, and good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us at Lower Makefield Park and Recreation Advisory Board meeting for April 13th of 2021. We're going to call this meeting to order with a roll call. We have Mr. Rob Labar, Michael Blundy, Dennis Wasaki, Michael Brody, our supervisor liaison, James McCartney, myself, Doug Kraus, and our Park and Rec Director, Monica Tierney. Absent, or at least not on the call at the moment, is Dave Malinowski and Kim Rock. Our first order of business is to approve the March 9th Park and Recreation Board meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
Make that motion.
Mike, we have a motion. Does anybody second it? Dennis seconds it.
Second it.
All in favor and approved of the March meeting minutes? Do you have a question, or are you approving?
No, that's
Okay. All in favor, just say aye. Hands up.
Aye.
Thank you. And we have approval of the March meeting minutes. Just a slight agenda change. Boy Scout proposal is going to be moved to a later date. So our next agenda item is the community garden proposal. And David, Monica, sorry, I might butcher his name. Is it Nershi?
I may butcher it also, but I think it's Nerschel or Nerschel.
Nerschel, okay, that's an L. Yes, okay, so.
He can help us when he comes in.
And we want to let him into the meeting.
Hey, Kim. Hey.
Hi, Kim. For those at home, Kim Rock has joined us.
Kirk started saying something to me and I hit the join. I have no idea what he was gonna say. He was like, Kim, just so you know, and then I hit the join button. So I don't know what the just so you know was gonna be, but.
Just so you know, the meeting has started.
Okay.
I'm guessing.
David is in the room.
Hi, David. How you doing tonight?
I'm very good. How are you guys?
Doing great for Tuesday. Sun is shining.
Yeah. Do I have permission to share a screen if I have slides?
Oh, sure. I guess, I don't know, Monica, is John going to take care of that, or does David handle that himself?
I think David can share. David, can you share?
I'll try. I just wanted to ask in advance.
Yeah.
I'm not the best Zoom user, but I'm pretty sure I can figure it out. Oh, no, I have to open my preferences. Well, if I can't do it with slides, I'll...
David, if you want to send them to me real quick, I would be glad to open them for you.
And just an FYI, David's joined the meeting as well. So everybody's here. Hi, David.
David, can you help us say your name properly? We weren't 100%.
Listen, if you don't know it by now, no.
No, not you, David.
Not Malinowski. Oh, Dave Nerschel. I think I said that correct.
Yeah, that's correct. Nerschel is correct.
Sorry, Dave, I didn't see you.
All right, let me know if you can see the slide. Can you see that?
Yep.
Very good. I don't think it needs to be any bigger than that. So thanks everybody for having me. This is my first time joining your meeting, although Monica recruited me to help volunteer to organize the community garden a few years back. I actually don't know, maybe 4 years ago. Something like that. And so I've been playing the volunteer role since that time, and glad to say that actually 2021 is our biggest year ever. I don't know if that's driven by increased interest in gardening following COVID times. It might be, but actually we're almost full for the first time since I've been gardening here in Lower Makefield Township for about the last 10 years. So I wanted to speak to you tonight about a couple of proposals that we've been talking about as members of the community garden. The three items I wanted to talk about are soil sampling, honeybees, and then specifically around the plot that we call plot 16. So soil sampling, we use some testing services from Penn State Agricultural Laboratory. I've done this a couple of times myself. There's a way to do the soil sampling. You essentially want to take a core sample about 10 inches deep, 1 inch in diameter, take about a cup of that, and you send it off to Penn State. And for $9, they will give you a report like you see here in the top right. This was for, I don't know if this is, actually April 1st, 2021, you see. So this is my plot. What's interesting here is it's pretty clear to see from the bar chart that the fertility of the soil there naturally is pretty low. I've fertilized this plot pretty heavily 2 years ago based on a soil test and already well below optimum levels. And so I'll be amending the soil in my particular plot this year, certainly. But given this low natural fertility, is my recommendation to all the gardeners that at the plot this year that they undergo the same type of testing. Each plot, of course, is slightly different based on who's been gardening there, for how long, what sort of plants they've been growing, or what sort of weeds they've been growing. In some cases, if it hasn't been used for a while. So what I'm requesting here tonight is roughly a budget of about $200, about $150 of which would be to cover the $9 charge for the Penn State Agricultural Analytical Services for each gardener. I don't anticipate, we have around 18 gardeners this year. I don't know that they will all request reimbursement for this or all want to participate. So I'm estimating around $150 at the maximum. And then I do think it would be useful to purchase one of those soil sampling tubes. I mentioned it's a device that lets you get about 10 inches deep and get a nice core sample so that you're not under or overestimating the fertility at the very surface of the soil. So that would be about $50. We could figure out if you would like me to maintain that or if you'd like to keep that with the township and Parks Department in some fashion. Doesn't matter to me. So that's my first proposal. Monica, I don't know if you wanted to pause there and discuss before I move on.
Doug, would you like to open it up to the board for questions?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I'll open up. Michael, looks like you've got a question for Dave.
Can I get a little bit, what happens with the vegetable? Like, I don't know much about the gardens. I know that they're there. So like, can you give a little bit of like a higher level, like, how many gardens are there? How many people are growing? It sounds like everybody gets their own plot. So do you then keep can we get a garden 101?
Sorry, I guess I should have done that. Let me give you the 101. So, first of all, the area is at the community garden. We call it, I guess it has a couple different names. The Memorial Park, I suppose, is probably the official name. It's it's just to the east of the main driveway, between the roadway and the fountains. And it's roughly, I'd say 250 feet by 300 feet in total area. There is water that the township provides at one location. Residents can request a plot. That plot will remain theirs until they no longer desire to use it. Each gardener is responsible for his or her own fencing. Fencing is pretty much a must because of the deer population, as you can imagine, are pretty destructive, as well as the resident groundhogs and rabbits. So individually, the gardeners will erect a fence. Generally need to have some kind of deer fence at least 6 feet high and some sort of rabbit fence that keeps the smaller rodents out. The township assists with provisioning of the water, and they also do a great job maintaining the grass surrounding the area. So they'll come through with the mower, as I assume they do for the rest of the park throughout the summer, and they keep the grass down. The gardeners, we tend to keep the aisleways clear. There's a 3 or 4 foot aisle in between many of the plots. That will get a lot of high grass and weeds over the summer, and we generally take care of that ourselves. That's kind of a one-on-one. Did you have any other specific questions?
This is Doug. Just a couple of follow-ups. How many plots and the plot size? Does the plot size vary? Are they all the same size?
Yeah, they generally two sizes. 25 by 25 is the smallest, and then a 25 by 50 is the larger size.
And then how many plots in total are there? Is it 6?
Well, there's if you only count them, the numbering system we use goes 1 through 25, and that would be for the 25 by 50 size. And then if we subdivide those into the 25 by 25, we give those an A and a B designation. So hypothetically, if you were to split all those, basically there's 25 plots. You could have up to 50 if they all were set at the 25 by 25 size.
So today, because you mentioned you had the most, so how many plots are occupied then?
We have 18 individual owners. A lot of them are husband, wife, individual sort of plot owners. It has been as low as maybe 10 in previous years and has grown for the past 5 years up to the 18 mark.
So right now there's, I guess if I do the math, there's 7 vacant plots roughly?
There are, based on the low utilization in the past, there are some areas that are occupied. I'd say some gardeners, myself included, in full disclosure, I occupy more than one spot. So I occupy 2 myself, and there are a number of us who have two of the 50 by 25. So that'd be 50 by 50 total.
Okay. So I guess, are there any vacancies right now?
There's one, and I'm going to get to that in my third proposal.
Okay, that's fine. And you mentioned fencing. So are there any specifications? I mean, you said specifications, but it's up to the individual to basically use whatever fencing material, or is there specs that you kind of guidelines you give to them and say, here's the recommended, or they can choose what they want?
They can choose what they want. The only recommendation I personally give is that they go at least 6 feet high.
Okay.
I mean, if you read online about how high a deer can jump, the safest is actually 7.5, but that seems to be unnecessary around here. Typically 6 feet is sufficient.
But material wise,
Doug, and they could also, I'm sorry, Doug, they could also choose, if they wanted to take the risk, they could choose to do none. There's no fence requirement. It's just that it'd be kind of crazy to plant something and leave it unless you wanted to feed the deer or the rabbits.
No, I didn't know if the township or as a group, hey, that particular material is not, acceptable, or there's certain guidelines. I was just curious in terms of.
I have a question for Dave.
Everybody uses the same, just about. I think when I go out there and look.
It's generally, the posts are generally either metal poles or wood 4x4s.
Yeah.
The deer fencing is almost always black. Sometimes, the green gardening color that you'll see on metal fencing.
Question for Dave or Monica. The gardeners, when they request the plot, is there a fee involved? Do they pay the township anything?
I do not.
No. But I do want to mention something with that. A lot of the gardeners donate the produce to the homeless or needy, or Dave, you might be able to talk about that a little bit more than I can, but a lot of our gardeners donate back.
Yeah, that's right.
And Dave, just a question back to the fencing for a second. I see it's up to the individuals. That kind of makes sense, but would it make sense at all to consider putting up a fence around the entire area of the gardening so that there's one fence, less material, or is that just too, I don't know.
I'm glad you raised that. It's actually sort of a long-term objective of mine. I've never done the math to figure out what it would cost to do the entire area. The one question in my mind is how many access points would we need to make sure that people can easily get into their areas and perhaps drop off compost or something like that. So I haven't done that math, but so far with the change we made a few years ago, and Monica knows this history, in let's say 5 years ago and more, we would have the township provided an additional service, which we don't do anymore, which is they'd come through with I don't know what you'd even call it, a huge tractor with a tilling device on the back that actually, a harrow, let's call it, that would turn the soil. And because of that, all the gardeners would need to remove their fencing in the fall so that the farmer could come through in the spring. But that's actually pretty disruptive. It tends to spread more weed seeds. It didn't do a great job actually tilling the soil, so you'd have to go in there and do it anyway. And as you could imagine, it was a ton of work to take your fencing down in the fall and put it back up in the spring. So that was, I think, one of the reasons we didn't have a lot of repeat gardeners, just because of the amount of work. Especially with a number of our gardeners are older. The gentleman next to me, Robin Van Oates, I think he's now 84. And actually the gentleman who was the previous volunteer to take my role, Don Wood, was over 90 when he stopped gardening. So you can imagine trying to put up some 4x4s and hang some fencing is not the easiest thing. Now that we are keeping the fencing up year round, the idea of fencing the entire area is less incentivizing to me, but I think it's still something that we could talk about. And if we wanted to go for a more visually appealing look and sort of unified look, that's one approach you could take.
It looks like someone left the tilling machine up there.
I have one there, and I've covered it with a tarp most of the year. And it's actually one of my challenges. This is not one of my requests, but I have talked to one of the Parks and Rec gentlemen about trying to keep some materials in the shed there, because I don't have a way of transporting a large tiller back and forth myself. I don't have a truck, nor do I have a trailer. So I think it would benefit us. In fact, I'm willing to purchase a tiller myself, a nice large one, but I don't have a way to transport it. So if we could find a way to find some space in that shed there and have the township provide that'd be fabulous. That way we wouldn't be keeping things outside.
Thanks for the update. So Monica, maybe as a follow-up, maybe part of our road tour, as we look to, if we get on the road tour, maybe we can look to explore, one of those concepts about a singular fence and see if that makes sense for, site improvements. And then per Dave's point is like, I don't know what's in that shed up there at Memorial Gardens, but if that's something that we can provide ample space for some additional equipment, then I guess that's something that we can address.
It's pretty full. I saw in there the one time, and there's one really big mower, and then there's some kind of I don't know what you even call it, some sort of it's bigger than a bobcat. It's pretty big.
Maybe we just need a bigger shed. So
Yeah, or maybe just a little garden shed or something like that, something small.
Yep. Right next to the garden area.
Do we want to go through all three of Dave's points before we decide to vote on any one specific request? Or do we want to handle each one individually?
Who are you asking?
I was just, if we want to go through each of them, or we can, ask the board's opinion on each individual one with regarding the soil sample. I mean, obviously this budget comes out of your budget. I don't think it's a lot of dollars. I guess, Dave, in terms of, this would just be automatic, right? So we wouldn't have to ask anybody. We would just automatically take soil samples of each plot, right?
I think that'd be the easiest way to organize it, would just be, especially if we get the sampling tube, then I could just go out there and take all the samples myself, and I could organize that.
Now, is this something maybe we could go back to the gardeners and ask them if they would put in to do the testing?
I wouldn't force somebody to do it. I mean, because I think we can do, if we don't want to pull this out of the township budget, what I would say is, I mean, I've funded it myself for my own area. I know at least 2 other people have. So sort of treat it as a sort of a voluntary thing. And I've provided everybody the information on how to do it. It's not challenging. So, but I felt like if the township wanted to continue to grow and make sure that people are successful given the fertility conditions that we observe.
And again, I don't know what other services the township provides. And Monica, I know you talked about, a plot fee, or I don't know how that would go over, but like that might be something as you incorporate and say, hey, if you pay an annual, plot fee of X amount of dollars, that will include, an annual soil sample, includes maintenance, these 5 things. And so at the end of the day, it might be the same, or less, depending on what kind of services each plot member in the township provides.
Dave, do you have a sense, and again, I don't want to maybe have the debate, but like, do you have a sense if the gardeners were asked to pay a fee, what would be is there a level that would be insignificant to them, like where they would say, yeah, for like $5, sure, happy to do that, or because then I see where you're going, Doug. Maybe then there's a little kitty that gets formed to fund stuff like this.
Personally, I think $20 or $25 is reasonable per person.
Okay. Well, obviously it's too late to start it for this year, but that's maybe something we could.
Yeah, for next year.
Because it sounds like there's a lot of things that that could help, that could be provided to help the gardeners for a really, I would keep it a really nominal fee if so it wouldn't be a dissuader, but that could be a good idea.
And then you're not like each time you're saying, hey, here's another, you got to pony up $10. You could do it or not. It's like, hey, here's your annual fee for the plot. And that includes, 1 soil sample, includes maintenance by the township, includes water service, all the, things that you can bundle together that kind of says, hey, this is what you're getting. And it's just, like you said, it's nominal for $25, $30, whatever. So Monica, and I mean, obviously from a budgetary perspective, I mean, this makes sense, but from a $200 budget, I don't know what's in your budget or not.
Well, I don't think 200 is not going to make or break
Nope.
this year, but I do think in the future we could probably make the program a little better if we do start considering charging some kind of plot fee where we could support you more and we could work together a little better.
Yeah.
It's up to the board. If you want to do something this year, that's fine. If you want to leave it up to each individual gardener this year, and then we discuss this further for the future. But
there's some gardening already going on there. Someone's got a pretty nice spring crop going already. I just saw it today.
Yep.
Bye, Dave.
Well, we were out there. We had a good crew out there Saturday morning. A lot of the new, I'll show you on the last slide, sort of the layout, but a lot of our 5 newest gardeners, the downside to being the last one to join the garden is you get the plot that's been grass covered for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And you might know it's not easy to take up that grass. So one of our gardeners was nice enough to sort of loan out his sod cutter Saturday morning. So we were all out there cutting sod and getting those. And then we have another guy who has a tiller. So we're hoping that he'll bring it this coming weekend and we can break up the soil. So it's a lot of work. There's a lot of sweating going on Saturday.
Monica, or Doug, closing thought from me on this. I think since farming is such an inherent part of the community, the basis of this community, supporting this makes sense to me. I think if there's some nominal fee that could be, again, I don't want it to be a dissuader at all because I love the fact that people are out there gardening. But if it could just kind of become a self-sustaining thing where there's these little items, maybe even a shed at some point, or maybe a big perimeter fencing or whatever it is, but there's some way to do that without affecting raising the taxes.
Good.
Okay, so during fee schedule time, we can discuss that further. But if you wanted to go ahead with this year, it would be up to the board, and I'd be glad to.
And I personally think it's probably the water's over the dam already. If people are out there, I wouldn't do it this year.
Okay. Good. Why don't I move on then? If you like gardening, you're going to love this one. So honeybees, as you know, are a critical part of our agricultural crops. And as you can imagine, for a vegetable garden, they're incredibly important. If we don't have good pollination from bees, we don't grow good crops. And I think, cucumbers and watermelons and all this, and there are a number of crops that we grow in the area that are dependent upon honeybees and other bumblebees and whatnot for pollination. So here's the pitch is the question whether you would approve maintaining two honeybee hives in the garden area. So let me go over the points. I think 2 hives would make the most sense. 1 could probably be sufficient given the number of bees there in a single hive. The cost, I mean, this kind of gets into the previous fee discussion. The cost and upkeep we're not asking the township to support it. That would be managed by the members of the garden. I would propose that the hives to be present spring through fall. I wouldn't necessarily want to keep the hive there over the winter when there's no break from the wind. They'd be more exposed. So I propose to take them off site. I am a beekeeper, so I'm only asked. I think this is dependent upon having someone who can manage the bees or willing to do the work. There is obviously some liability, although there are honeybees around, and actually the honeybees aren't terribly dangerous. It's actually the wasps and the hornets that are actually dangerous to people. But there are some community members who could get freaked out by the presence of bees. I can't say for sure. I would definitely recommend that if we were to proceed, we put signage up and probably put some sort of screening so that the hives aren't visible from the main road. And as I mentioned here, we would register the name of the beekeeper with the park board so that we could track who's accountable for or taking care of it and removing them at the end of the season. But again, the benefit would be, I think there could be some community benefit with the struggles that honeybees have now, both with pesticides, fungicides are both dangerous for bees. You may know that there are introduced pests from Asia that are causing honeybee declines. You've probably heard of hive colony collapse disorder. And so it is useful to continue to invest in honeybees so that we can maintain this important insect as part of our ecosystem. Please, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dennis.
How far do the bees venture from the hive?
Yeah, they fly up to 2 miles.
2 miles. So I don't.
Bees. I'm sorry. How many bees are in a hive?
Yeah, over the winter, it probably drops to about 5,000, and over the summer, it can get as high as 50,000.
So we're going to introduce 100,000 bees to Memorial Park?
Absolutely. That's the best thing that could possibly happen for a natural garden area.
So Dave,
Sorry.
I don't have a map of the park or the garden in front of me, but obviously, do you have a place in mind relative to the adjacencies to the garden plot, or like are they where in proximity or to the plots versus where the honeybees would be placed?
Yeah, I'd propose to put it right in the garden area, sort of as I was discussing, just to the east of the main entrance road, adjacent to the plot. I mean, certainly we could discuss if there was a more remote spot that maybe is farther from the road, less likely for vandalism, although I don't think Lower Makefield has a whole lot of vandalism in general. And I think most people here would be a little too scared to go knock over a colony if they didn't know much about it. And that's why I think signage is important. I recognize that this is a little, if you don't know much about bees, it's a little bit of a funny situation, but I would put it right on the plot, but open to finding a remote location that might be a little more off the beat.
I mean, how remote, like far from the plot, like, because you're introducing it to the whole park, so it doesn't necessarily have to be close to the plot, right?
That's correct. Yep.
And I know we're developing, I don't know if you're familiar, but we are developing the other side of the park as well. That hasn't been developed yet, but obviously there's more activities that are planned. We have the park there for the playground for the kids, and so I think people have a lot of questions about just understanding. Obviously they're not necessarily as dangerous, as fatal as other wasps and yellow jackets and things like that. But I know the other part, Monica, maybe on the other side where we're developing, is there park yet that hasn't been developed that could be set aside for these that wouldn't be as close to the main area? I don't know the answer to that, but Dennis, you have your hand up or you're clapping?
Yeah, the clap was a mistake. I just tried to put my hand up. I just was going to ask, I don't know if this is something Monica knows or if anyone on the board might know. are there any restrictions for residents? Like if a resident wanted to have a beehive in their yard, is that allowed?
I'm going to have to check with Jim with that. I don't think there are. I think we've had this discussion before. Now, what I do want to tell you, there are places like Silver Lake Park or I believe Shady Brook maybe has bees. Dave might be able to tell you better, but you don't even notice them when you walk past them. It's not, well, I think this is a very cool idea. I think maybe we need to navigate it a little bit, and maybe it has to go in front of the Board of Supervisors just because of the nature of it and, maybe debunking some of the myths. Ideally, I think it's a cool idea. I just feel like there's some logistics we might have to work through in order to make it happen. And Dave, what would happen with the honey? Is there some kind of objective here? And where would the bees go in the winter if they're not in our park?
If we could find a sheltered location in the park, like we were talking, I don't think I would want to leave them out. If we were to position them at the garden proper, I wouldn't want to leave them there because of the wind. But if we looked for another spot that was a little more sheltered, maybe by some trees on the north and west side, then I think we could very well leave them there in the winter. I just know if anybody's been out there in the winter or the fall when the temperatures drop, that wind can really kick across those fields, and it's pretty unpleasant. If we took them off site, we would find just someone's house, where they could be sheltered, or backyard essentially.
Is there an optimal time to put it? Obviously, it's April, right? Is there an optimal time that you can put in?
Usually May. Yeah, you can usually purchase bees in the May timeframe.
Okay, so.
And to Monica, your question about the honey, the purpose wouldn't be for honey, although we could. I guess one of the questions I have is whether the board feels there'd be other peripheral benefit to having sort of a community day or something where, just as an example, I've had a Boy Scout troop ask us about gardening. And so I've done a tour of the gardens for a Boy Scout troop in the last year. And perhaps there'd be similar opportunities to do some events like that with local scouting chapters who would want to, some of these chapters might be interested in some of the honeybee things, and we could arrange for that as a mutual benefit to the township.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I was thinking that while you were saying that, kind of like that Howe Farm in New Jersey, the Living History Farm, where they do stuff like this. So if you did have a beekeeper on like a Saturday morning and you had Boy Scout troops, whatever, come out and the beekeeper harvests the honey and the kids get to watch. I think it's a really great idea. I have 2 friends that are beekeepers, so I do know that it's not dangerous and you really don't notice the bees. I think my only concern would be that they should be in a remote area or possibly even like a fenced remote area with signs. And I'd be afraid if they were like too close to the gardens that, a gardener or someone might think, oh, we can just mess with this ourselves. It's for all of us. And you really can't, you have to be the professional that's messing with it.
Yeah. I also like the idea. We treat the dandelion in the athletic fields. Now, Memorial Park is not used in that way. So it's a great way to introduce pollinators or the bees to that area where the bees may not have the opportunity in some of our other park areas. That's just kind of a cool, bigger picture.
I think Monica, kind of building on what Kim did, I know that as you're looking for programming stuff for a day for something for kids, for people to learn stuff that the department can offer, here's things about bees or gardening. So we have, volunteers and resources in the township, just another thing that you could think about as adding to your programming.
Dave, yeah, I got a question for Dave. So with one beehive, there's 5,000 up to 50,000. You said it could grow up to,
right?
And then so they're kept in the boxes, and then you just let them out. Like how does it work, where they can fly 2 miles away, and how do they come back?
You better be careful of getting me started talking about bees. so there's.
I'm allergic to them, so I just want to know, how this works.
Yep. So let's see. How do I want to? So your question is where do they go? Most of the bees, the bee life cycle starts. It's a 3-stage insect life cycle: egg, larva, and pupa. And then there are multiple stages of the adult. Once the bee emerges, there's a house bee which basically cleans the honeycomb. There's a nurse bee that can feed the developing larva. There's guards who protect the hive. There are bees that will tend to the queen. And then finally, the last life cycle is to become a forager. And it's the foragers who go off and they're looking for typically one of 3 things, either pollen, nectar, or water. There is a 4th thing called propolis, which is like a glue that comes off of pine trees. So it's only the foragers that actually leave the hive. So at any given time, in the height of summer, when there's a nectar flow going on, that's when the hive is its biggest, as you can imagine, and a lot of the population is out foraging on flowers. And the remainder are still back in the hive tending to the brood or the developing young. So they leave the hive when they're in that forager mode and they're looking for one of those 4 things: water, pollen, nectar, or propolis. I don't know, Michael, did that answer your question?
So what % of the hive are foragers?
When you're at the height of the nectar flow, which around here is, let's call it roughly mid-May through the end of June, like a 6-week period, I'd say probably 80% could be foragers.
And if we had, each of those 4 things in proximity to the garden area, then, they wouldn't need to go 2 miles to find it. They would, find it and then come right back.
That's correct. Yeah, they won't travel 2 miles if they don't need to. Yeah.
Do you have a plan for, having those 4 things readily available?
Generally, nature provides. And the only question I have is that we would watch out for if we were to try it is with the fountain there. We would probably want to try to provide some alternative water source so they're not going over by the fountain. But otherwise, for pollen and nectar, that's got to be coming off of natural sources. It's only going to be coming off of flowers, which are either on shrubs or trees. And generally, we don't notice the flowers on most trees. Certainly, redbuds and whatnot we do, but they can get pollen and nectar from maple trees and plenty of other weed trees in the area.
All right.
Does anybody else have any questions regarding the beehives? I mean, I think this is an excellent opportunity and an idea. And but Monica, to your point, I probably want to bring this in front of the board with at least a recommendation to proceed.
Can I just throw out my 2 cents?
Sure, Rob, go ahead.
I mean, certainly, I think it's a benefit. I think it's premature at this point. We don't even know where we're going to put them, what the effects would be. Speaking from a legal standpoint, I think the liability thing is a big issue that needs to be flushed out before we get to any point of approval of this. And I have fears. Unlike we don't have a lot of vandalism, but it's a prime target that would warrant that. So without the proper fencing or some kind of security to prevent that, I'd have concerns about that also. I'd like to see kind of a whole laid out proposal of where it's going to do and what the cause and effects and what the liability is before we move forward with anything.
Yep, good. I can continue to work with Monica on coming up with a proposal for where this might be situated and come back to this group.
You know, it just came to my attention that one of our spectators is Janelle, told me that farmland is also looking to have bees on one of their properties. So I might reach out to them and find out a little information about what they've already been through. I think that'd be helpful.
And James, from a board perspective, I mean, what would you recommend? Like, if we were going to at least put something in front of the board in terms of an exploration, or not come to the board until there's a full plan in place that says, hey, this is what we're planning, or exploration of honeybees at Memorial Park? Before David does the extra work. What's your thoughts on that?
I think the recommendations, that Rob and Mike have explained, as far as, making sure that it's a well thought out plan, is probably your best bet before you present it to the board. I think, Monica, you're right. The preservation people there is somebody else that's actually looking to do this on some of the preservation land. It's actually a guy that backs up to it. He wants to do it right outside of his backyard, and it's a little bit more complicated because he needs access to it. There's going to be a gate. So I'm not 100% sure where they are on that. But if you want to reach out to I think it's Michael Blank, he could probably give you some insight on where they are with that. But, from my perspective, I think it's a great idea. As long as there's checks and balances in place to limit the liability they come from, especially the most interesting thing you said was the water source. Obviously, we don't want, them relying on the Gardner reflection fountain as a water source. So
yeah,
that would be my only concern. But yeah, besides that, it sounds amazing.
So what if we ask Dave to come back to another meeting, say next month, with maybe he and I can work together a little bit over the month?
Yeah, I would love to see this thing go forward. I just think it needs to be, more formalized and more thought out.
Works for me.
Great. Okay. Move on to number 3. Right?
Number 3.
Before we leave, Doug, sorry.
Sure, Dennis, go ahead.
Did Dave leave, or is he still?
No, Dave's still with us.
So Dave, once you make this initial procurement of the bees, do they sustain themselves, or do they have to be replenished at times?
Yeah. If you do a good job as a beekeeper, they do sustain. There are some treatments that need to be applied for the mites that I mentioned earlier. So you need to keep the mite population low. That's one of the things that causes the colony collapse disorder that I mentioned. The queens do eventually age. Usually 2 years is a good working lifetime for a queen. So you either need to purchase a new queen or try to raise a new queen for the bees. So there are conditions where you might lose the entire hive over the winter. That's why you can't always guarantee you'll have honey, because if the hive doesn't survive over the winter,
right,
you're not going to get any honey in the spring.
Okay.
So, I'd say roughly you could count on, well, I hate to use the word count on, but consider ideally you'd get about an 80% hive live rate through the entire year, August to August.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
And just real quickly, Doug, going to the honey, I think one of the issues that you want to outline is what is going to happen with the honey, that you guys aren't going to be profiting from it, or how that's going to work out. We put a proposal. That's something.
You're breaking up, Robert.
I'm sorry. The honey, I think what's going to happen with that should be flushed out in whatever proposal you put together.
Okay. Fair enough. All right, my last topic is plot 16. So I mentioned that here's a satellite view from Google Maps of that garden area. You can see the roughly 25 plots there. I don't have them all numbered, but I think you can figure it out. Plots 1 through 5 are the ones that we recently desodded, just to give you an example. It's 16 that I actually wanted to talk about today. This is all the way towards the front or the western side. And a couple of years ago, in a heavy storm event, the water ran through and washed off a lot of the topsoil as a tilth, essentially, and washed it towards the south across the last row of plots down there at the bottom. So it's my concern that I've been, as the volunteer who organizes, I've been leaving this one empty. I've not assigned any gardeners to it. Because I'm just worried that, first of all, that it's lacking some topsoil in some of the areas. There's a couple of huge ruts in there from where the water ran through. I don't know what the soil condition is like, although I imagine a lot of the topsoil has been washed off. We can certainly leave it this way, but I wanted to bring it to your attention. I'm not terribly comfortable assigning a gardener there, just because I don't know if he or she will be successful. But if we were to want to use it, I think two things need to happen. One would be that have someone, not me, who understands, stormwater runoff, make a proposal as to how to keep, I think there are atypical events, but it certainly can happen with strong thunderstorms. Is there a swale that we could put in somewhere, or a slight berm that would just reroute some of that water to the south without actually running over the garden plots? And then secondly, if we could get the stormwater managed, then come in and replace a little bit of the topsoil so that make that plot workable. Again, it's just a request for discussion. I have no idea what it takes to remediate stormwater flow paths. I'm not a water engineer. I think probably people who know what they're doing can take a look at it and decide is it something straightforward or not.
Do we have anybody in the township that would understand stormwater management of this?
I can have Jim Majewski take an initial look at it.
Yeah, that was going to be my recommendation, was Jim.
Yeah, so maybe we can go out there. Jim and I have a couple things going on out there, so I can have him.
Hey, Monica. Sorry, Monica, I feel like about 18 months ago, a Boy Scout came in building some sort of drainage from the volleyball court along with the pagoda things.
Yes.
I would wonder if that worked, if that sort of solution would work here, not necessarily something that needs a heavy lift per se, because I think it was a Boy Scout project, so obviously it's a reasonably sized project for volunteers to get done.
I don't know if it'd work under a garden just because of the piping and stone we had to put underneath. I don't know if they'd be able to grow on top, but I think we'd have to come up with another solution.
I guess I thought it was going down the road in between the tree. Is the water coming towards the left of the 16? And so you're trying to divert it down that left, right where that mouse is there?
I think the water's running. This is the path. This is the sidewalk here, this white bar.
Okay.
I think it's kind of running in I guess this would be a southeast direction. So it came across 16 and washed across this area here and then towards the south. So, I don't know if there's a swale that can be created in the front or a berm of some sort. Again, I don't know stormwater management.
I think it would need more of a diversion than what we did there.
All right. So what do we ultimately need so Doug, what do we ultimately need today at this point?
I think for plot 16, and obviously we've got Monica will talk to Jim. I think for number 2 on the bees, Dave's going to come back with a more formalized plan, and then we can hopefully for next meeting.
And are we not asking for the 200 for this year? Is that all? Cool. Right.
That's right.
Cool.
Good.
It was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much for entertaining the discussion.
Thank you, Dave. It was
Thanks, Dave.
very informative.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Dave.
Appreciate it.
Can we get Twinkle Twinkle Little Star on next?
So next we have Sydney. So we'll pull her in.
In the waiting room?
Yeah, she's in the waiting room.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to share my screen now if I can.
So Sydney is, just to introduce her, she's one of our Parks and Recreation interns this term. She's a senior at Temple University, and she just got a job she can tell you all about. It's very exciting. I have to say we have about a 95% placement rate for all of our senior interns, which is very exciting. So very proud of them, and I'm glad to have Sydney here today.
Welcome, Sydney.
Thank you, Monica. So good evening, everybody. Like Monica said, my name is Sydney Roseborough. I can tell you about my job later, but for now, I'm here to talk about CAPRA Chapter 3, which part of that section covers the marketing and community relations of the Parks and Rec Department. All right, so to get started, some main goals of these two sections are to provide timely information to residents of the community to help spread awareness of the township's available amenities, resources, and services, and overall to highlight features of the township that help to make Lower Makefield a great place to live, work, and play. And then lastly, to help further the mission of the Parks and Rec Department. So before we dive into the meat of this section, I just wanted to give everybody a brief overview of where Lower Makefield Township stands today. So ever since the 2003 master plan update, several changes have happened in the community. So to start off, housing development has slowed. So before 2010, housing development increased in the double digits every year. From 2010 to 2017, housing development only increased for 2.5%. So the rate of housing development is slowing in the township. The population is aging in Lower Makefield. From 2000 to 2017, the number of individuals between 55 and 64 increased by 6.5%. And this is the largest increase of age in the township. There are also extremely high education levels in Lower Makefield. 97% of residents above age 18 are high school educated, and 70% of adults have a college degree, at least a bachelor's level college degree. Furthermore, new expansions and enhancements to the Park and Rec Department land and facilities include Memorial Park, the dog park, and the community center in the last 20 years, and there are several projects underway. So a few demographics are listed on the screen that I wanted to highlight for you all tonight. I want to bring special attention to the median age in Lower Makefield Township, which is 47, and the median income, which is $139,808. This median income is double the amount of the state median income for Pennsylvania, which is $61,744, and the national income, which is $68,703. So Lower Makefield median income is double both the national and Pennsylvania, more than double actually, as well as a few other demographics which are listed on the page. You will find that the exact, the document goes into more depth amongst age of Lower Makefield Township and includes several different tables, but I just wanted to highlight one here for you today. I specifically wanted to highlight that the largest percent of age in 2017 was the 35 to 54 category, and the second largest was the 5 to 17 with 19.9%. And then the 35 to 54 had 29.5% in 2017% of the population. So this information was used to help determine marketing efforts that help to complete this section of Chapter 3. So you'll find that my presentation aligns with the document. And so the document starts with Section 1 being marketing. So that's what I'm going to begin with today. So this section outlines methods the department will use to create effective marketing strategies for future programming and communication efforts for the township, or the Parks and Rec Department for the township. So there are several different marketing channels that the Parks and Recreation Department utilizes here. These are 6 of the main marketing channels. So there's print and television media, press releases, social media, the township website, banners and signs, and the mailers and newsletters. So the document goes more in depth on each of these areas, and then who creates the material, who publicizes it, things of that nature. But this is just a brief overview, brief snapshot. This is a section of the document located in Appendix A that includes a much larger table than this. This is just a little piece of that table, but this table highlights the specific channels that the Parks and Rec Department utilizes, the schedule for these channels, and then a description of each. So again, this is found in Appendix A. And the way that the Parks and Rec Department makes sure that these marketing strategies and techniques are working is through evaluation criteria and methods. So for the qualitative evaluation, we created an after action report. This report will be sent to all stakeholders and partners for a program or event. It simply asks about feedback for the event, what was done well, what could be done differently, and then goes into specifics of each event. That exact document can be found in Appendix D of this section. And then for quantitative evaluation, there are 2 different ways that the department will utilize that: analytics from social media platforms, and then registration numbers from Community Pass. And more information about those 2 can be found in section 5.2. I wanted to show you all an example of the social media numbers. So these 2 graphics are found in Appendix E and F respectively, and they both highlight user numbers and locations and engagement criteria for the social media platforms of the Parks and Rec Department. The one on the right specifically highlights age range, gender, location, and usage for the Parks and Recreation Facebook account and Instagram account specifically. And again, these 2 can be found in Appendix E and F. Next, like the document, I will get into the community relations and community partners of the Parks and Rec Department. So the goal of this section is to help establish rapport and encourage participation and help to engage stakeholders within the community. This is not an exclusive list. This is just a few of the community partners that the Parks and Recreation Department holds with the township, or with community partners within the township. So a few are the LMT seniors, religious organizations, township boards, local schools, the sport leagues, local businesses, friends groups such as 5 Mile Woods, Boys and Girls Clubs, Boys and Girl Scouts, the internal partners, and then other partners. Again, this is not an exclusive list. There are many more partners that work exclusively with the Parks and Rec Department. This is an example of the user group for Lower Makefield Township. This can be found in Appendix C. The user group document details who uses the facilities of the Parks and Rec Department and the fees associated with their use. It also goes into detail a little bit more about insurance, housekeeping, things of that nature. It's not super detailed, but it goes into a brief overview of each of these user groups. So again, you can find that in Appendix C of this document. Moving forward, I want to reiterate that this is a fluid document, that the document will be changing, updated and changing to adhere with the changes in the world and the changes in Lower Makefield Township, especially the marketing side of things. Marketing is constantly evolving, constantly changing, and this document will change to try to adhere to the needs of the community. And again, this is just a snapshot of the chapter sections 3.3 and 3.4. The document goes into much more depth and much more detail on these areas. So now I will open it up for questions. What questions does everybody have? And I can also stop sharing so we can see each other.
Thank you, Sydney. Wonderful job putting the packet together and presenting all the information. So before I ask any questions, does anybody else on the board have questions specific to the marketing and community relations plans as presented by Sydney? I had one question about you mentioned evaluation and analysis. Do you have a recommendation as to cadence of that and how to communicate that back to the key stakeholders? But obviously, the Park and Rec Board and Monica and supervisors.
So you mean the results of the after action report or the social media side of things and registration numbers?
Any of the methods, tactics that you utilize, like in terms of report back and evaluation?
So the after action report will be sent to all stakeholders after an event. And then the registration numbers, usually when like these community partners partner, they get a copy of all registration numbers. Monica can correct me if I'm wrong, but they can see their exact numbers as well.
So I imagine, Doug, we would come up, you know how I do your annual tour, the road tour. I imagine as part of that, we could do just an annual report to review the annual numbers. But at the end of each event, I imagine we can get into the habit of letting people know how many touch points they're getting with their marketing dollars and that type of thing. So when people sponsor and that type, we can provide that information to them.
Yeah, I think it was just as you as a department advertise to drive results, just so whether it's on a quarterly basis and understand what the metrics are, and are you getting, click-throughs, are you getting engagement, sometimes it's more, some of those things can be done daily, right? So you have to change the message to get different responses or a different picture. You can have the same content, but sometimes the headline changes. I know they do that on CNN, on other sites. They don't change the article. They'll just change the headline based on real time. No one's clicking on it. They'll change the headline.
Now, we have to remember we're working on a municipal budget.
That's all right. Come on. I know, Monica, in your free time that you have other things that you can do.
So it's not going to be as,
It's fluid as that, I understand.
Yeah. So, we could look at things quarterly. We could look at things by event and see what kind of attention different ads are getting along the way. But, we're also limited in our scope and the way we can work. So we have to work within a municipal framework.
We understand. All right. Any other questions regarding the marketing plan? I think Sydney's going to go over which one's next? Events and programming and events. Is that correct?
Nope, I'll take over from there.
Oh, you are? Okay.
For that.
Thank you.
So if anybody has any other questions for Sydney. And I'm going to tell you.
Congratulations on the new job.
Oh, yes. So now I can share. I didn't want to share it in the beginning because then you'd all be distracted. But I'll be working with the Cleveland Cavaliers upcoming this June. So I moved to Cleveland May 21st. So
Cleveland Rock.
I actually go to visit this weekend. So I'm gearing up for all of that. So it's all kind of a whirlwind: graduation, move, start a new job.
Good time to visit Cleveland. Good time of the year.
Yeah, the NFL draft. Yeah, true. The NFL draft will also be there in a couple weeks too. So big tourism stuff going on in the city right now.
Sydney, thank you for your help with this program and good luck with your new job.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks, Sydney. Okay, so I'll turn it over to the programming and events. Now, this is a document you saw when we went over a lot of the other policies, when we were going through all the policies at one time, but this one was new to you. I did send it out to you in the last packet and then resent it out to you again today just to make sure that you had it, but it was just before the meeting. Just wanted to know if anybody has any questions. If the board is interested in improving and recommending it, that'd be great. Didn't get much feedback by email, minor things. Just made some minor adjustments to it since the last time. And, that's all I have. If anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to go over anything.
What do you need, Monica? A motion to approve the program and events policy?
To recommend to the BOS. Motion to recommend.
Does anybody have any changes, questions for Monica?
It's come a long way. It looks great. Thank you, Monica.
I agree.
All right, so if someone wants to make a motion to approve the Parks and Recreation Program and Event, what are we calling this, policy or?
No, she just said to bring it to the Board of Supervisors.
That's what I meant. The motion to approve, to bring it in front of the Board of Supervisors.
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
So moved, plus my son yelling in the background.
Hard to tell on a Zoom call who's the culprit. Right?
Yeah, Brody, so moved. Sorry.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Monica, this one's approved to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Next, I guess, is the master plan and needs assessment bid results.
Yes, so we got the bid results. I included everything in the packet in a very brief, nondescript paper with the results there. So it looks like the tool recreation and planning was the most on point as far as financially for us. And the proposal was fantastic. I know Ann Toole, she's been around for some time in the recreation world. She's pretty local to us. So I think it's a great proposal. There was one that was a little bit less for 13, or what was it? 12,000, but they only were planning to do the needs assessment portion and not the master plan portion. So we kind of negated that bid. It didn't give us what we needed. And the other two were just astronomical as far as pricing. So
Kimley Horn was the Mercedes of the.
Yeah.
I went through theirs last night. Pretty impressive, but obviously from a cost perspective.
Yeah, it was pretty impressive, I have to say, but not within our range as far as budget goes. So just wondering if anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to ask them. This will be on the Board of Supervisor agenda for approval tomorrow or next week.
Approved I don't recall, when would this then become fielded? What's the timeline?
So we'd like to wrap it up in the fall if we can.
Okay.
So it'd be a pretty quick timeline with, a lot of engagement from the board and the community. So we really should get started as soon as possible once if the BOS approves it next week.
Okay, great. Any questions for Monica on the needs assessment plan? No? Okay. ADA transition plan update?
I just wanted to tell you the Disability Advisory Board did approve the ADA transition plan, and it will be moving on to the BOS next meeting. So they'll go through it. I don't know if they'll discuss and maybe review and then vote for it, or possibly make a vote next meeting. So we'll see how that goes. That's really just all my update. Very brief.
All right. Do we have any liaisons in the waiting?
Hey, Mike, guys, what's the latest on Oxford Valley Bike Path? I forget.
I'm hoping it will get started this fall or summer and possibly completed fall through even into the new year. So that's what we're looking at now. There were just a few little logistics we were working through. So very excited for that project.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Selfish.
I know. Oh, another big thing that happened at the board meeting, BOS.
I meant to ask you, is this Memorial Park?
Yeah, Memorial Park.
I was about to ask that. So.
Enough fee in lieu money in so that we can bid out the tennis and pickleball court portion and some of the platform portion of the preparatory for the Memorial Park project. So we're going to attack it in phases. So we're going to get started on that. Bids will go out. I think they'll come back in at least 3 weeks. So we might be able to see some action on that. Hopefully, maybe get it in for this summer at least. The pickleball has been booming. I don't even know the number of members at this time, but I believe it's about 150. So it's just nonstop pickleball in this office right now. So really looking forward to having that relief of the additional courts. So that's exciting.
Monica, I don't know if anyone else has noticed, but that area, that new part of Memorial Park by where just the parking lot is, there's an ad hoc group that's been playing volleyball there very regularly. They set up a really nice net, and they've been playing on I guess it would be the north side of the parking lot.
When do they practice?
They're there. I see them a lot. I don't know if there's some, regular cadence to their visits, but I go by there quite a bit, and they're there a lot. They're not using the sand courts. They have their own. It's like more regular volleyball, I guess, not sand volleyball.
Okay, I'll have to look into that a little bit. Does anybody know who might that be?
No.
Okay. I had seen
I don't think it's an organized. I think it's just a group of people that are organized. I don't think it's a club or anything. I just think it's a bunch of people that have a nice spot and they go out and they play quite a bit.
They don't like our sand courts, which is kind of sad.
Well, it's two different games, right? Sand volleyball and regular volleyball.
Yes, that's true. Okay, thank you for letting me know, Dennis. I appreciate it. And I think Noelle is in the room for the liaisons.
Doug and Monica, while we're waiting for Noelle to join too, back to the garden, the gardening area.
Mm-hmm.
I'll save it till after. Let Noelle. Sorry.
Noelle on?
John?
Sorry, moving them in now.
All right, great.
Sorry, I thought I heard her join.
Hey everyone.
Hi, Noelle.
Noelle, we get to see your face tonight.
Yep, I made sure, although like Brody, my kids have been yelling in the back and my dog has come in, and every time I left the room, I was worried that you were going to call me in and I wasn't going to be here. So glad to be with everybody tonight. So yeah, I have kind of just a brief update, but I do like joining and hearing everything that's going on, and really grateful to hear everything that is moving forward and all the work you guys are putting in. It's really nice to sit in here, and it's only been a little over a year that I've joined these meetings, and I wish more people would join them to really see and hear what's going on. So thanks for everything. We started our season officially over the weekend with both our travel and in-house teams getting started. We have had a few rainouts so far, but nothing too excessive like a few seasons ago. Since my last update, we actually added about 35 additional players. So we're working with 171 girls in our softball program, 514 boys and girls in our baseball program, 58 girls in our GEMS travel program, and 30 kids in our magic program, with 172 township volunteers who have all gone through their background checks, but have been doing just an amazing job organizing all of the kids across every field we can get our hands on in the township and the school district. So it's really been awesome to see the fields kind of busy and bustling, every night and every weekend. We've had, since our last meeting, we also were told that we will be the host of both the 8U state baseball tournament this year, as well as the 8U girls softball state tournament. That'll be the weekend. I think it's the last weekend in June will be the girls tournament. And then actually one of your esteemed colleagues, Mike Brody's 8U travel team will be playing in the state tournament. He gets an automatic bid, but I do believe from what I've seen of their team, they wouldn't need the automatic bid regardless. So, but it'll be great to see those kids playing on our fields in July. I believe that's the 9th, right? The July 9th, the weekend of July 9th.
July to the 13th, yep.
So we'll begin planning for those in the next couple of months here. We actually have a meeting next week to start talking logistics. But for those of you that have been around, we posted a couple of these over the years, and they're really exciting and gives us a chance to showcase our facilities and the township to a really large community, especially since it's state. So we'll be pulling in teams from Montgomery County, Delaware County, et cetera. So we're pretty excited about that. We're certainly maintaining our COVID protocols. We have had some situations where, thankfully, we've maintained protocols to the point where we haven't had any instances where we've needed to shut teams down or there's been exposure. So we were really lucky that all of our coaches and our families have been following the rules and really no pushback, at least none that I've heard. So we're happy for that. And hopefully in the next couple of months, we'll be given new guidance that maybe allows us to pull back a little bit, but for now we're going to be as strict as possible so that we can keep our families safe and ensure that even those that are still uncomfortable and in some ways feel comfortable when they're coming to our fields. And then I know on the agenda, it does say that we wanted to discuss drainage at the fields, and Monica and I have been talking about it. I think since we met when Monica joined, we had some plans that I think were, naturally delayed because of COVID, but we've remained in active communication, and we're going to do some short-term things at least Fred Allen and some of the other fields to help with the water that sits there. I mean, certainly, and Doug, you probably know this better than anybody on the call. Since the last time we've dug up the fields, things like the usage of dry dirt, the way some of the guys use the tractors, just creates these, hard concrete like fields. So drainage does become a problem. But in conjunction with, I believe, the bike path and some other things that are going on there, some drainage issues are being considered, and then hopefully something more long-term as the plans are developed for some of the other projects within the township. I think I said all of that right, Monica?
Right.
Okay. That's all I got.
Was the drainage specific to Fred Allen, or is it?
It is. I think, over the years we have dug up portions of Stoddard with just using the shop vac. So, when there's puddling on the fields, you have to dig a hole, shop vac out the water, then fill it back in with infield mix. And that's really the only way to get rid of that puddling. Right now, Fred Allen, essentially where you would put all of your defensive players or where there are, lakes of water. It does take a lot of manpower to get those man and women power to get those ready. And in some cases we are out a couple of days on that. But we've been lucky with rain and it's only happened a few times, but it definitely needs a regrade at this point for a short-term fix. But long-term, it's going to need to be dug up. But that is something that Monica and I were talking about summer of 2019 and then COVID. So, we're patient. Not everybody is in the league, but, we're working pretty well together. So.
Okay, great. And great news on the 8U. Rob and I can remember way back when our two boys went to, I forget what town. It was hot as blazes, but I remember that.
That's half the fun. I mean, the tan lines that you get in those tournaments are classic.
His son was passed out in the air-conditioned vehicle from getting
Guys, first dose of heat exhaustion against the catchers.
It's not too much to ask. We'll take air conditioning on the fields prior to the tournament. So just write that in somewhere.
Is the snack stand still closed?
Actually, Steve Cilia is going to run our snack stands this year for us. So we are really lucky that he stepped up to do that. And we were considering other options, such as like the travel teams each taking a weekend and raising money for themselves. But it'll be nicer to have Steve just kind of take care of all of that. So you will see the snack stands reopen at least when the fields are being used enough to warrant the snack stand being open.
Makes sense. Dennis, you have a question?
Yeah, Noel, you made me think of this when you were talking about every field you could get, you just cherishing, because I've been there and I know how challenging that is. And so I'm going to ask no one on the board, yell at me for suggesting this, but I walk through Memorial Park all the time, and there's a beautiful little field back there that has no one on it ever. And I'm not suggesting that we consider, providing it on a permit basis for some long-term thing. But I'm just wondering if there's not some way of allowing PAA to have an occasional use of that field. And Noel, I don't even know if it would be something that would be attractive to you guys, would help. But in exchange for, I don't know how much maintenance is done on the field, but I'm sure if in the springtime when the PAA is out in force with all of their help to get things going, combined with some of the township resource, that field maybe could be fixed up a little bit better than it is. And then an occasional, I would love to see an occasional baseball thrown around there, or hear a crack of a bat or something, because it is never used. And I know it's intended for, it's open space and it's supposed to be for non-permitted use and all, but during the week, it would be great if a team could get there once in a while and practice there.
Yeah, I mean, certainly we would be open to it. And during the week is kind of the hardest time for us to find fields with teams practicing and then also game schedules. We actually had to spend close to $8,000 this year just to put on hold indoor space at Nations in the event that we needed extra space. And so we have teams sometimes practicing inside on our dime there. And it's nice to have it. And those guys are great over there, really great to work with. But sure, the sport's intended to be played outside, especially on a nice day.
And Dennis, I mean, back when our kids were young, Rob, I think it was that team, I think we used to practice over there. It wasn't formalized. It wasn't, it was just, we're going to go grab over there because we knew that it wasn't being utilized. It was open. But again, Monica, maybe similar to what we did with with football, if there's a known team or division where there's a shortage, and you could rotate a team through and say this age division has it several nights a week, to split among teams so that it's not, a free for all, and then you have 5 teams trying to show up. Maybe it's something to consider, and just say if there's a particular division that's more challenged.
Yeah, and it's usually the little kids too that that would need it the most. We previously have had the outfield of Kiola available most weeknights prior to this year, but this year we have 5 teams at the 13 to 15 age group, 2 in-house and 3 travel. So we're using those fields more than we have before, at least at that size. A bunch of our coaches, led by our 11U travel team, did a lot of work down at Mac H and are working to make it convertible from 50/70 to 46/60, so we can have additional options then, especially when the fields are taken up for the softball tournament, when we do lose some of the baseball fields. And usually our guys are great at planning the schedules around it, but it does give us another option, especially when some of the baseball teams are also practicing for their states and districts and state tournaments during that time of year. Yeah, we'll take anything you got. Big backyards, anything,
It might be a good t-ball space to be honest. It requires less maintenance, and the kids are digging holes with their feet in any way. But it might be a good t-ball space. So
maybe just follow up and see, where there's some gaps, and see if, we could find a way to offer you some incremental space so that it's still open on the weekends and maybe just during the week. Yeah.
I have two things. I did first as probably the only person with, oh no, Kim does too, but I just want to thank Noel because by far the baseball got us through COVID. And for as much as, I can give Noel grief during our baseball meetings and whatever, I truly appreciate everything that you've done, Noel, to keep us up and running, keep the kids safe. As I said, you and I will always be you and me, but I truly.
Oh, you're talking about, Mike.
I truly appreciate everything that you do, even if I don't always show it.
Thank you. No, you show it. I know you do. You're as passionate as I am. And I was saying to one of our vice commissioner of baseball the other day, it's a lot of work, with COVID, but I just love it. There's no other way to describe being involved with this league, and everybody in it. 172 coaches, and they all have different personalities and need different things, but it's just fun, and I really do love it. So thanks, Mike.
You're welcome. Monica, from a park and rec perspective, the parking lot, when you pull into the parking lot on the left is like a gravel-ish type of parking lot. And over the last, I'd say 6 months, the rain and runoff has turned that into what is essentially like a big landmine of, I wouldn't say potholes because it's not road, it's gravel. But I'm not sure if that's like it seemed like a truckload of rock or something could easily fill and resolve.
Where is that, Mike?
When you pull into Kayla Field Complex, right on the left, almost like by those clothing bins, like that parking lot where those clothing bins are.
Yeah.
And that's actually a very heavily used lot. But I didn't know if that's a PAA thing or a park and rec thing, but that's something that I've really noticed has gotten considerably worse, like this off season, I would say.
Yeah, I was there yesterday. It is on the list.
Very cool.
We have a very long list.
Yeah, yes, sorry.
So we did bring, just to update everybody, we did bring on 2 new maintenance staff just a couple weeks ago. And then we have 1 more coming on board, and they're being trained up. So, but hopefully we'll be on deck and ready to go, and that will help out with the, being ahead of things a little better. But we had quite a bit of a transition this year. So, but we're back up and running, so it's good. So just real quick, Doug, if there are no other liaisons on the field or on the phone, I don't know, John, are there any other liaisons?
We have Dean Curtis.
Okay. Just real quick before Dean comes in, just relating to Memorial Park, the football agreement was for 1 year at Memorial Park. I have not reached out, nor have I had any outreach to see if they wanted to continue that, but that might be something that we need to discuss here in the very near future because they would be starting in August. So
were there any issues?
There were very little issues. There were some parking issues at the beginning. Then everybody started to train to park in the lower lot. Now, when we start having pickleball and tennis there, I think there may be more of an issue just from parking perspective. But for the most part, it was fantastic. I mean, really no problems, no concerns, no complaints. It got dark, and when it got dark, it's dark, and departing in the dark is interesting. But other than that, it was fine, I thought. Mike, I think your kiddo was out there.
It was invaluable. I would almost say I'm shocked that they haven't asked, because I couldn't imagine having football this year without having that field. That would be how strong I would say that.
And
they had easily 8 teams there in very small spaces, and it was very efficient. It was never loud. I think we put together a really good plan there, and I thought the way we kept it in that tight little tranche worked.
I was out there quite a bit too, watching just to make sure that it went well also. And I have to agree, they stayed in their area. They were, good. There were a couple parking snafus here and there, but it was remedied quickly. They were great working with us. So, I'd be glad to do it again until we can get more field space. But, we just have to make sure that that's something that they need. And, we'll have to bring it through everybody again, the boards. So we should move on that fast.
Okay. Are you going to reach out or somebody?
Yeah, I will.
Knowing that there wasn't any issues, right? So assuming that they need the space again, well, maybe they're just not that far ahead in their planning. So,
Monica, what did we have to do last time to get that approved?
Like that went to the Board of Supervisors.
It went to the Board of Supervisors, so they're probably going to want to hear how things went last year.
So if it's going to be that timely to get a decision, could this board empower Monica to take that recommendation to the Board of Supervisors similar to last year? I would say the only caveat be that it's another 1 year, so there's no permanency. But if there were no issues and it went pretty well and it was invaluable, as Brody was saying, could we empower her to just make that recommendation to the supervisors or take it on our behalf to the supervisors if it comes up and it's that timely?
If there is no issues, I would recommend we take it to the Board of Supervisors. This way, if when they do ask, we've already have.
I was just trying to be efficient and say not have to come back through us to meet and then move it to the supervisors. Can we do that now? And just say if she gets.
I'd like to start getting it longer. If it's deemed appropriate, I don't see why every year we need to go back to the Board of Supervisors for approval.
The only reason I would say that, Brody, is like if we're going to have a long range plan here, there's going to be new fields somehow, some way created that remedy that, and we can restore the non-structured part of the use of that park. We should do that.
And if something doesn't go well, I don't want to have an open-ended if they have a permit there. So, it's a renewable on a yearly basis, right?
And piggybacking on what Monica said, when pickleball and all that get there, that may cause different issues with parking and stuff like that. So I don't think we want to make it an open-ended thing.
I guess I just don't think it needs to go to the Board of Supervisors every year. Even if we reevaluated it, unless James wants to be doing permits for Memorial Park every year. But
it's just, I think Mon's just saying it was successful and we're asking for a renewal into year for 2020, fall 2021.
I think the recommendation from you folks is probably adequate enough. we don't need to do a deep dive into it, Mike, as far as getting this.
Exactly.
I think it ran pretty well.
That in 2020, the previous year was successful, and if space is needed, the board, Park and Rec Board recommends that LMFA have the ability to use the field again.
Yeah, and I think there was limits on it. It was an age limit similar to what you're talking about with the T-ball and that back baseball field.
So if everybody's in favor, we'll put it up for a vote here, Monica. If everybody's in favor, someone wants to make a motion to recommend Monica ask for the Board of Supervisors approval to renew their usage of Memorial Park for would be fall of 2021. Anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make the
move.
All right.
Go ahead.
Second. All in favor?
All
right. All right. Thank you, Monica.
Okay, so who did you second?
Mike Lundy made the motion. Mike Brody seconded.
Okay, just want to make sure it was clear for Janelle.
All right.
That's it.
All right,
I was going.
If you're ever in doubt about who made a motion or who seconded it, you can go with Brody, and you're probably going to be right.
Just say Michael and Michael. Good.
Yeah.
I like
you want to let Dean in?
Moving Dean in now.
Thank you.
Hey, Dean, welcome. Long time no see.
How's everyone doing?
Good, Dean. Well.
So thanks for having me on. Lower Bucks lacrosse is in full swing. We haven't updated you guys in a while. We made a decision in January to take our whole program in-house. It was counter to everyone else in both SEPLA, which is a boys league, and PAGLA, which is the girls league, But with all the uncertainty with COVID, we decided that it was the best thing and the safest thing to do. And we were concerned it would impact our numbers, but our numbers are really strong. We're about 400 kids in the program again this year. Breaks down about 150 girls and 175 boys, inclusive. And then on top of that, we're also running our Trilax program. So what we decided was very counter to the culture of lacrosse in this area, but was within the guidance of U.S. Lacrosse, which is our national governing body. We're playing small-sided games instead of full field, like literally every other club that decided to play this spring, and we're already seeing a great improvement in skill because of it. So we figured all the kids had a year off and skill development was down, and we said, you know what, we're going to go counterculture and we're going to have them do something that we believe strongly in and always have. And it's turning out pretty well. So 175 boys, 150 girls. Our girls program is run out of Charles Bame, and our boys program is run out of Middletown Community Park. We do not have any fields in LMT. And our Trilax program is run out of Pennsbury High School. That has 41 boys and 20 girls. What I'd love to do this summer is bring Trilax to LMT in some way. Trilax is a program where we do 5 one-hour sessions. We provide all the equipment for a kid. It's about $125. We have a deal with one of the manufacturers to get them their first lacrosse stick. And I've done 7 of them myself, running them myself with the help of local high school kids as volunteers. And it's a great way to really introduce kids to the game. For those who don't know, I'm actually back at Pennsbury as the boys high school lacrosse coach as well. One of my starters was in a Trilax program 7 years ago. And so it's a great way to introduce at a low cost, because lacrosse is an expensive sport. If you're a boy getting started, you're looking at a couple $100 in equipment just to step on the field. So in Lower Bucks lacrosse, we've done a couple things to mitigate that. So the Trilax program is one. The other is we offer an equipment rental program. So for $60, a kid can rent their equipment for the season, and then they have the opportunity to buy it out. We have 30 kids this year renting equipment. So we feel like they wouldn't have had the opportunity to participate if it wasn't for that rental program. That's about it. We will do some tournaments and things like that, but we felt the in-house was the best model for our kids for this year. And it's proving to be pretty good so far.
Just, hey, Dean, thanks for the update. Much appreciated. Hope the family's doing well. On the Trilax, right? Is it like a camp? Is it a 1-day session, 3-day session?
We can do it however we want. So the one that I'm doing now is a 5-week, 1 hour at a time.
1 hour.
We can do a 2-hour, 1-day session. It's basically you're teaching you can run through all the basic skills of scooping, cradling, catching, throwing in anywhere from 90 minutes or to 3 hours if you really wanted to. So we could offer it as a camp. We could offer it as a 1-day event. We could offer it as a multi-week event. We'd love to bring it to LMT this summer in some way.
Monica, is that something that, I don't know, your schedule for summer activities through your kind of summer schedule, like whether it's, yoga and soccer and some of this, is this something that you could add to that calendar potentially?
Possibly. Dean, I think we can offline have a conversation, kind of try and fit it in. We did bring on Elizabeth Lawson, who presented last week. She's our intern. She's going to be our program coordinator. So I'd love for you to talk to her and see what we can do to work you into the schedule.
Sounds good.
Talk that out.
Thanks, Dean. I think that small-sided thing was a great move. The soccer guys learned the same thing. They went from 11-a-side down to smaller fields and more touches, skills got better.
Yeah,
really good move.
We're fighting. We're fighting the culture on it, though. I tell you what, literally, I've been advocating for it for about 12 years in Lower Bucks, and we changed 12 years ago. We changed our first, second, third, fourth grade program to the small-sided games, and when you look at the kids who are now in 7th and 8th grade, who have grown up from the time they were in kindergarten, my son and all his friends, the skill level of those top kids who've been playing in that format, they're all on club teams. They're all at the top of the game, and their skills are just Now, there may not be athletically as good, but their fundamental skills are incredible.
Yeah, and plus when they're participating in the smaller sides, they're just more involved. There's less downtime on the field.
Totally.
So, yeah, it's great. Congratulations.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Dean. Monica, do we have anything else?
I don't think we have anybody else as far as liaisons, but I have just a couple things to run over with you. So I gave you the Memorial Park project update. I gave you the actual financial reports, so you can take a look at those. If anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. We're ahead of where we projected being. Remember, we projected a 15% deficit on the pool registration. We're ahead of that, which is great. We're just on par with what our 2019 goals were, which is fantastic. So we're doing great there. We did, based on our conversation, purchase some additional signage to put out around the pool, and our pool banner doesn't usually go up until a little bit later, but we're putting that up across the road, hopefully in the next week or so. So that's exciting. Lots of information coming in from the county and the states of the new guidelines. So we think we have a pretty good plan in place for the pool. We'll be giving a presentation on May 10th. We've been working closely with the swim team too to see what we can do about potentially offering in-person meets, but blocking it off from the remainder and just a few meets a year. But we're kind of working on that with them too. But we are trying to make the pool season as normal as we possibly can in a COVID environment. So we're very excited about some of the things we're able to do. Looks like we'll be able to offer swim lessons. Looks like we'll be able to have some water aerobics. And those are some of the things that people were concerned about. And, you know, it looks like we'll be able to do it. So very excited about that. So if anybody has any questions about that before I move on to the next thing, I'd be glad to answer it. Okay, it doesn't look like it. So summer programming, we're starting to bring things back in person. We're starting in-person yoga in May in the parks. We're starting our walking club back up. We're slowly going to bring things into the community center, starting mostly in June, but we may try and touch a couple of little things that would be easy to bring back along the way. I'll start communicating with the seniors about bringing them back also. We did have a summer camp registration. We limited it to 20 just because of our size, but because of our limitation, we're trying to bring in some other one-week camps here and there. We're looking at a science camp. We're looking at a skateboard camp. We're looking at a variety of different things to bring in as additional camps so that kids can stay busy over the summer. We have a significant waiting list, so we were looking to see if maybe we can find some space to be able to house additional folks too. So we're trying to seek that out. But right now, if we start bringing the seniors back and we start offering the space that we have for the kiddos without doing trips like we have in the past, becomes a challenge. So we're looking into that, but there is about a 20-person wait list for every week. So that's a challenge we have. If we can expand, we will. Our maintenance is gearing up. One thing I do want to talk to you about is as part of CAPRA, there does need to be a maintenance plan in place. Lynn, Todd, and I have been working closely together along with Bob Copson to develop a really comprehensive plan. And the idea would be to create something that's more preventative. So we have a lot less of those phone calls where things that could have been prevented with some good maintenance, eliminated. So that would be the idea. And we're really looking at that. We really want to include the community too. So we'll go over that with you next month. I'll have Lynn in here to present that with you also. But as far as our summer maintenance goes, we're on point. We're on point with the pool. We're doing very well, feeling very excited about things and excited to see people again, which is very exciting. One other point is I did meet with Les Vanilla about Pennsbury tournament. They're running, but they're doing things a little bit differently. They're using just our softball field and the pool field, and that's it. They're going to have some other sites, alternate sites for the tournament. And, it sounds like he has a really good plan, and looking forward to having him back. He was here lightly last year, but looking forward to having him back this year. Very excited about that. One thing I did want to bring up to you is we are looking at doing events, sort of, as best we can. I'm looking to do Community Day. I think that we can have vendors. I think it's possible with some masking protocols and spacing. A little concerned about bounce houses and rides and how we would manage that. So we're looking at maybe making it more of a down home Community Day, like where we do races that people in the community might sign up for, sack races, that kind of thing, versus, bouncy houses with lots of touch points and grossness. So not saying that they're always gross. I'm just saying that in a COVID way, you know what I'm saying?
No, they're always gross.
We're looking at alternate ways, making it more of a community, old-fashioned type thing versus, some of the things that we may have had in the past. I am looking to bring the fireworks back. One thing that we're looking at adding and potentially partnering with another group, and I'll let you know more about that as I talk to the other group more, but is adding a 5K in the morning. We did run a successful 5K for 9/11 last year. I'd love to have an in-person 5K, another in-person 5K. So if we can add it, I'd like to gauge maybe the board's interest in doing something like that maybe ends up at Community Day and kind of launches the day. So I don't know what your feelings are about doing something like that, but if you're interested or have any questions about Community Day, I'd be glad to answer them at this time. No questions. Everybody's quiet.
I think until we get more COVID protocols, I think a lot of it's kind of like up in the air juggling. So
yeah, everything is juggling, everything that we do. So we're trying to do more outside things. We're trying to help some of our local partners do what they do too. And it's just been very interesting, and we're adapting, and some really great things came out of it. I have to say, I'm very excited about sunset yoga in the park at Memorial Park. Very excited about that. It seems like the walking club is getting a lot of interest. People want to do in-person things, and if we can do that safely, we're going to try our very best. The last thing on my list to go over with you is I had a discussion yesterday with a resident, and I think that his concerns are very, they're important, and I really see that they're valid. We went out and looked at the sand volleyball net right across from the township building, and I have to say they're very old and outdated, and I guess people have been using bungee cords to hold them up. I'm very sad to know that has happened, to be quite frank. I was disappointed that's something that we didn't catch. So I want to recommend that we take a look at it and maybe just replace the poles as a whole. They look like they're maybe 20, possibly 30 years old, rusted. They don't move. It's in really bad shape, and a lot of people do play out there. So
yeah, I don't recall the last time anybody's touched them, replaced them. I'm sure Bob would know best. Like, he's probably would know if he actually changed them at any time.
It looks like they may have been painted, like rust. It's bad. They're bad. So
what do you need from us?
I just want to make sure, I want to put it on your radar. I'm going to start looking at prices. If it's not something that's like going to blow the budget or that's reasonable that I can do, I'm going to do it, but with you in the loop. But I do really think that we need to address it. I don't think it's not a good situation out there, and there are people out there all the time. So
we obviously there's some at Mac, and then there's the one at Memorial. I mean, should we just look at all of them, just make sure if you're going to buy multiple, maybe there's some cost benefit. I don't know about the ones at Mac, how often they're used and what their conditions are, but it may be the same scenario that they're all purchased and put up around the same time. So
yeah, I definitely think we should look at all of them. He says he plays volleyball all over the township. So he says that his name is Ed, and I can't think of his last name right now. But But he was saying to me that the other nets are not so bad. This one is particularly a bad situation. So, but it is something in the maintenance manual that I want to make sure that we address, that we're checking regularly. Some of these other infrastructure things that aren't used by leagues that we're not hearing about as often need to have more maintenance checks so that we can prevent this type of thing. He did also mention a couple other improvements, which I agree. The sand is all over the place. Maybe clean cutting the lines might be a Boy Scout project. Cut it out nice, box it out nice. And he also mentioned runaway balls, particularly at Makefield Park. They go, when you're playing beach volleyball, you're playing in your bare feet, and when they go into your ball goes into the woods. It's a situation. So he was mentioning maybe putting up some kind of netting to block it from going into the woods. But we just had this discussion yesterday, but the big concern I had was the standards and net at community or at Keola complex there. So I just want to bring that to your attention. And that's all I have for today. If anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to talk about it.
I just a real quick comment, winding back to the gardening area again at Memorial Park. Maybe you could get a message to Dave. I wish we had mentioned it before he left the call, but maybe does he or do you have any insights into what neighboring communities do around programs? Because that would be helpful too for us to understand, like if Northampton or other areas or Newtown have community gardens. Do they have a fee that they charge, and what do they provide to their gardeners from their townships?
I'd be glad all the directors all talk. I'd be glad to put an all call out to all the area directors.
Yeah. Okay.
And just get feedback. But that would be an easy fix, and we can bring that back when he comes back too.
It'd be a nice comparison to understand like what Dave will be proposing is in line with those things, less than or more than. Just it'll be helpful.
Okay, no problem. If anybody has any ideas of questions that are important to them, how their plots are done, size of plots, what would be most important to know, pricing, please send that to me before I send it out.
Do you have any contacts with park directors in New Jersey at all?
Well, I could easily reach out to
I think there's a really nice community garden on 206 in Lawrenceville.
Mm-hmm.
I used to go by it all the time on the way into the office, and that one just seems to be very popular, very nicely maintained, very well organized.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody have anything else for the board or for Monica?
Make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
You want a second? I think one of the Michaels got it. With that, our Park and Rec board meeting for April meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Guys.
Good night, all.